It was a cold December evening when it all started to fall apart. Sam and I had been married for 3 years, but that night felt like the beginning of the end. We had fought before, like any couple does, but this was different. The argument was sharper, more venomous, as if we were both teetering on the edge of something irreversible. It all started over something so trivial. A party, a college reunion her friends had invited her to. I didn't want her to go, not because I was possessive, but because our marriage was already fragile. I thought staying home together that night, focusing on us, was what we needed. She disagreed. "I'm not going to cancel my plans just because you're being insecure," she snapped, slamming her purse on the table. Her words cut deeper than I expected. It wasn't insecurity. It was fear. Fear that we were slipping away from each other. Fear that the distance between us was growing. I tried explaining, but it fell on deaf ears. She was determined to go, as if this night out with friends was more important than the cracks forming between us. When she left, I told myself it was just one night. She'd come back and we'd talk, sort things out, maybe even laugh about it later. But as I sat in our empty living room, the silence grew louder, and I realized this wasn't just about the party. It was about everything. The late nights she spent working, the missed dinners, the arguments that never seemed to get resolved. This was the straw that broke us. By the time she returned home early the next morning, something inside me had changed. She walked through the door, her face lit up with a drunken glow, laughing about some joke her friends made, but all I could feel was a cold, unfamiliar detachment. I didn't yell, I didn't fight. I simply told her I was done. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice eerily calm. She looked confused, almost like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're seriously breaking up with me over a party?" "It's not about the party. It's about everything." She argued, of course. She cried, made promises that things would change, that she'd try harder. But by then, it was too late. I had severed the connection. Something inside me had already let go, and no amount of pleading could reel it back in. I packed my things and left. We filed for divorce a few months later, and that was that. Years passed. I moved to a new city, started a new job, met new people. I had moved on, or at least I convinced myself that I had. I rarely thought of her, except for those moments when I found myself alone late at night, wondering how things might have been different if we had just talked more, if I had been more patient, if she had listened. Life carried on as it does, and eventually, she became nothing more than a distant memory, a chapter in my past that I thought was permanently closed. Until one evening. That same December chill was in the air when I heard a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was late, far too late for a casual visit. As I opened the door, my heart sank. There she was, standing on my porch, looking almost exactly as I remembered her. Time had been kind to her, but there was something different in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or sadness. I couldn't quite tell. "Hi," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I stood there, stunned, unsure of what to say. "What are you doing here?" She smiled faintly, that same smile I once loved. But this time it was tinged with pain. "I've been thinking about us, about what happened, about how I ruined things." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to slam the door to protect myself from whatever emotional storm she had brought with her. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good times, couldn't help but listen. "I made a mistake," she continued, her voice trembling now. "I was selfish. I didn't see how much you were hurting, and when you walked away, I was too proud to chase after you." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. That was a long time ago. "I know," she said, her eyes welling up. "But I never stopped thinking about you, about how I let the best thing in my life slip away. And now, here I am, standing at your door, hoping that maybe, just maybe, you'd let me in." It was surreal, standing there with her after all these years, hearing the words I never thought I'd hear. I had imagined this moment before, the confrontation, the apology. But now that it was happening, I wasn't sure how to feel. Anger? Sadness? Relief? I've moved on, I finally said, though my voice betrayed a hint of hesitation. I know, she whispered, wiping away a tear. I'm not asking for us to go back to how things were. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry. I needed to say it, even if it's too late. For a long time, we stood there, the cold night air swirling around us, a thick silence between us. Part of me wanted to reach out, to pull her inside and talk, maybe even forgive. But another part of me remembered the pain, the broken promises, the loneliness that came after. I appreciate you coming, I said, my voice steady now. But we're different people. We've both changed. She nodded, her face falling slightly, though she tried to hold it together. I understand. As she turned to leave, I couldn't help but feel a pang of something. Regret, nostalgia. I wasn't sure. I watched her walk away, her figure disappearing into the night, and for a moment, I wondered if I had made the right decision all those years ago. Closing the door, I realized that sometimes, even when people come back, the scars remain. She had shown up at my door hoping for redemption, but what was done was done. We were two different people now, with two different lives. And sometimes that's how it has to stay.